Chicago Harbor Locks. So that's the main entry point into downtown Chicago. All the boats from the lake going into the river will go through the locks, and all the boats leaving from the river out to the lake will also go through them. And it's run and ordained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It is not run by Sea Dogs, or myself, or Captain Jamie, or First Mate Scott. There we go. Again, guys, welcome aboard the Sea Dog. Where we are right now, we are currently and slowly exiting the Chicago harbor. That line between the harbor and the lakefronts could be signaled by that lighthouse you see straight ahead of you. So while we're making our way out there, quick housekeeping things while we get going. First of all, I want to introduce you guys to the crew. That way you know who's taking care of you today here on the Sea Dog. So behind the helm, making sure everything runs smoothly on the lakefront and downtown and on the river, that's going to be Captain Jamie. Everyone turn around and wave to Captain Jamie. Turn and wave, turn and wave, turn and wave. There you go. Secondly, you saw him walking through the hot aisles, making sure everything's all good and squared away for the speedboat ride. That's going to be First Mate Skunk. Everyone turn away to First Mate Skunk. Turn and wave, turn and wave. There you go, 2 for 2. Lastly, guys, my name is Daniel. I'll be your tour guide. If that wasn't completely obvious enough, this is where you wave to me. There we go. Perfect. Don't forget about me. I have attention issues. So, while we're cruising forward, quick set of rules. Be sure to remain seated with those seatbelts on the entirety of the boat ride on the lakefront and downtown on the river. Secondly, guys, if you have a hat, that's awesome. We're about to pick up some speed, about to pick up some wind. Make sure that is adjusted. Yes, already took off. Make sure it's either adjusted tightly or you're holding onto it firmly. We just want you guys to leave with everything you bring on board here today. Thirdly, guys, no littering. We do get our drinking water for the entire city of Chicago from Lake Michigan. Spoiler alert, it is clean, but this is the source of the drinking water. Fourthly, no smoking or vaping of any kind. This is a boat. Those things don't go well together. Again, guys, just remember to remain seated, keep going. While we continue to cruise on, I'm going to quickly demonstrate how to put on a life jacket as we get going here on Lake Michigan. snow in the other boat here, that's all good to cruise downtown and continue on our tour. Now, talking about the Chicago skyline, it's one of the most iconic skylines in the entire world. Now, if you look left to right all the way down, what I like about the skyline is there's no uniformity. It's not just the same office building or apartment building with the same rectangular high-rise just stacked against each other. No, completely different designs. So when we had to rebuild Chicago after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, where most of the city tragically burnt down. So when we rebuilt it from the ashes, it wasn't just this skyline in front of us, it was most of the city development. We wanted to invite architects from all over the world to submit in designs, sketches, blueprints of the buildings that we should put up in our city. So when we point out different styles, that's because we have buildings from different countries, different cultures, different architectural styles, different time periods. Today you might see a building that's been standing for 115 years next to an office building that opened up 10 months ago. So there's a bunch of different styles, but the two main styles I'll be talking about today, just to keep it simple. The first one is modernism. If you don't know what modernism is, that's all right, I didn't until I took this job. Modernism is when the building looks like what it's being used for. The way you can tell something is an office building or an apartment building even though you've never been inside of it. The second style is postmodernism, and all that means is the aesthetic of the building, there we go, the aesthetic of the building reflects what we see in everyday life. That can be a geographic landscape in the area, that can be a person, that can be an event, you name it. I'll be pointing out different examples alongside our tour. Also, what's cool about this boat ride in particular and the time of day, Chicago is going from the mundane business work hours into the city, into commuting hours, into early evening, into the lights lighting up the city. So it's a cool transition as we'll be cruising along. This skyline, I bet, will look a little bit different when we come back here towards the end of the tour. First building I'll point out is this one on the right. This black building right here. Now, if you look at the skyline behind it, you'll notice no other building will be as close to the water or further out than this building. This is Lake Point Tower. It is a very luxurious apartment complex, and if you're wondering yourself, Daniel, you know, you're talking right now, you seem very important. Do you live here? I don't. But many people do want to live here. It's pretty competitive for two main reasons. One, like I said, it's the closest building, take out apartment building, it's the closest building in general to the waterfront. People want that view. And also, secondly, a lot of famous people have lived in that building. So in terms of athletes here in Chicago, during the late 80s, early 90s, during the Bulls dynasty, that's where you'd find Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan. Yes, they had bunk beds. Secondly, was Sammy Sosa, Chicago Cub legend as well. And in terms of non-athletes, Jeff Bridges, Oprah Winfrey, and Tom Cruise all had units in Lake Point for bus or train or whatever that may be for you. Well, we've gone over rules, we've gone through the locks. Welcome to downtown Chicago. We'll be kicking things off up to your left. That set of three buildings right there. That is the St. Regis building. I'll be talking about that tallest one right there. It is the third tallest building in the city. I'll point out all members of the top 5 here today. This is our first stop. It's also our first example of postmodernism. I'll point that out to you. The curve, the shape of the building, reflects the curve of the shape of the river. The 6 different shades of blue tile glass reflect the color of Lake Michigan. And if you see towards the top end of those 2 open floors, I get a lot of kids on these tours that ask me if they forgot to finish the building. They did not. They also see that. But what that acts as, it acts as a natural wind tunnel. So we get a lot of wind coming from the water or whipping through downtown. It's more stable for that building to have those open floors to the left of the building. That is the other building by Jeannie Gang. And when you go by, those concrete patios are supposed to look like water cascading down the side of it, almost trickling down with the different patios. So they look to be all the same format and shape, but they're all unique dimensions for every single floor. And the purpose of those patios is to allow for high-rise communal living. Meaning when you're normally, in a hotel or an apartment, you can only see the bottom of the floor above you. But with this, it's staggered enough to where you can get to know your neighbors 50, 60, 70 floors up in the air. Next stop is going to be straight ahead, just to your right, that white building. That's the Wrigley building. You may already be aware of it, or aware at least of the Wrigley name here in the city, with their ties to the Cubs, Wrigley Field. But this is one of the older buildings on the river. It's also the site of the first major corporation to pick Chicago as their world headquarters, the Wrigley Chewing Gum Company. We still call it the Wrigley building, but they actually moved out of that building quite some time ago. It's now the world headquarters for Groupon. But the longer you look at that building, whether you realize it or not, your eye line will be naturally pulled to that clock tower at the very top. The reason for that is that building is coated in white terracotta tiles. It's 6 different shades of white, the darkest to lightest going from bottom up. And in order to keep this effect, once a year they'll get a crew out and they'll completely clean and hand scrub the outer surface of the entire building. Now, as a tour guide, I have to remember a lot of dates, a lot of names, a lot of buildings, a lot of facts. So, if I ever forget the name of the next building, all I have to do is turn around and look at the 20-foot gold lettering of the name and title of the building. So our next stop along our tour will be the second tallest building here in Chicago. It's going to be Trump Tower and Hotel. So when it opened, it was supposed to be the largest, tallest building in the world. But after 9/11, they had to descale those plans, so now it sits here in Chicago as the second tallest. And if you see that spire on the very top of the roof, that is the only difference in height from the number 2 and number 3 St. Regis building we passed, that blue tower. Also, want to point your attention to your left-hand side. This is one of my favorite aspects of downtown Chicago. This is the Chicago Riverwalk. So, whenever a building gets put up downtown, they have to have 2 things. 1, they have to have park access, and 2, they have to have a section or exhibit on the Chicago River Walk. Now, each section will have its own theme or style. So this one right here, we'll start here. This is a marketplace. So restaurants, cafes, bars, all that good stuff. And I'll be pointing out different sections, but would highly recommend checking out Chicago this way, specifically if you're visiting. Our next stop is on your right-hand side. It's the set of twin identical towers. This is going to be Marina City Towers. Now as we go by, if you look all the way up, it's supposed to look like sun petals falling from the sky straight on top of you. But here in Chicago, we call it the Corn Cob Building because someone one time said it looked like corn cobs. It's ruining years of... if I built a building and it became known as the Corn Cob Building, I would be very upset. But it's an apartment complex, and it's built to be a self-sufficient residence. So it would have everything you would ever need, so that you would technically never have to leave, which is either convenient or creepy, depending on how you look at it. So I'll point out, this bottom floor you have marina access, if you have a boat or a jet ski, anything like that. These cars, you got a parking garage, and all those floors with the black railing patios, those are apartment units. Inside, they have their own grocery stores. They have their own gym and fitness centers, and they have their own communal living spaces as well in both of those towers. Our next building is going to be on your right-hand side, this brick building. It's the oldest building on the Chicago River. It's the Reed Murdoch Building. Its architectural style is American Prairie with that brick. Very unique look here on the Chicago River. It's also rumored to be haunted. That's because the Reed Murdoch Building was the site of the largest U.S. inland boating disaster in the history of our country. So right after the Titanic sank, there was a huge emphasis on not only having enough lifeboats, but like having twice as many as you would ever potentially need. There was a boat here in 1915 called the U.S. Eastland, and it was docked alongside this riverbank, and they had all of their lifeboats at the very top side of the boat. And when they invited their 800 crew members to do maintenance one day, once they stepped on, the weight distributed on an uneven scale, and the boat top-sided on its own in the Chicago River. 800 souls lost their lives that day, and they used that building as a temporary morgue for the East Winds disaster. Also, a cool aspect of Chicago that I always enjoy, just on the mundane side, is you got a lot going on. You got cars going by, you got people walking, you got people riding their bike, you've got boats going underneath, you've got a train coming on top. Whenever I say there's a train coming, it never shows up. And today I'm 2 for 2. I'm losing my mind. Let's go. We're going back to the right-hand side. This is going to be merchandise mart. One time a kid was sitting up in the front and he pointed and said, "Big." I agree. It is a big building. So this was, when it opened, the largest building in the world in terms of just square footage. It was a huge mall and marketplace, not only for Chicago, but people all over the Midwest would travel to Chicago just to shop here in the early 1900s. To give you a frame of reference of how big this building is, you could fit Wrigley Field and the old White Sox Stadium both in there at the same time. And we're only seeing that one side of it as well. It's got its own underground train stop, and for a decade run in the 2000s, it had its own zip code. I don't mean to say that it shared a zip code with like 1 or 2 places. I mean that building was its own zip code. It's crazy. Where we had a stretch of some of the oldest buildings, this is going to be the newest additions to the riverfront. On your right, you have Wolf Point Towers, an apartment building on either side of this large towering scale. This will be the new world headquarters for Salesforce. You can see their lobby entryway on that second floor above the staircase. And again, straight ahead, this is going to be River Point Tower. Another example of postmodernism, that parabolic arch at the bottom not only supports the building, but it whisks away any rainwater for someone entering or exiting the building. You can also see the opposite skyline reflected on the face of the building, leading us to one of the more impressive feats of architecture in the entire country. Officially, this is 150 North Riverside Plaza, but here in Chicago, we call it the Beaver Building. And you'll see why once we go through this bridge. That's because it looks like a beaver has been chewing on a tree log, given that slanted scale on your side. So again, all of this land on this side of the river is owned by the railroad and train companies. So they wanted to build this building. They didn't want to pay them for every square footage, so they only used 25% of the lot, and they stacked the rest of the building on that 25%. So the moral of the lesson is, if you're frugal enough, you'll invent a new style of architecture that will impress everyone. As we go under this bridge on your right-hand side, you'll see the second tallest clock tower in North America. If you're wondering the name of this building, the company logo is just above the front door. It's going to be the Boeing building. So Boeing, similar to Wrigley building, so Boeing had their world headquarters here in Chicago for a while, but they actually just moved out. Most of the workers are working remote and not utilizing this massive office space here. And at the same time, they had problems with their 737 airplanes, so they moved out. Again, we still call it the Boeing building. Again, you have a huge, modern, corporate scale building right next to one of the most unique buildings on the riverfront. This is going to be 2 North Riverside Plaza. Now when we go by, if you look at it, it's going to look like the Great Sphinx of Giza. The front paw of either Sphinx is going to be on your left and right hand side. the tallest building in the world from 1976 to 1998. That's going to be the Sears Tower. And before anyone corrects me and says, actually, David, I Googled it, it's Willis Tower. Well, here in Chicago, we refuse change. That's going to be the Sears Tower. So, the head architect and the head engineer, they wanted to make the world's tallest building, but they didn't know how to do it, which is like the most relatable thing ever. I also want to make the world's tallest building and don't know how to do it. But they were stuck on their designs, and they actually were at lunch one day, and the head engineer had a pack of cigarettes, and he put it on the table, and the pack was on its side. When he put it on its side, the lid opened up, and cigarettes kind of slid out. And when they slid out, they almost slid out like bundling your fingers together. You know, bundled tightly, but height differences. And that's when the idea hit them. Something called spiraling and bundling. So instead of taking steel frames and mounting them on top of each other, they're bundled together and they climb upwards and spiral, almost like a spiraling staircase. So you can see the frame of it. It gets more and more narrow towards the top, with that last bundle being the skyscraper that broke the world record. Anyone here on the boat been to the top of Sears Tower? Anyone? There we go. Was this today? Okay, so you all just Googled like Chicago adrenaline and just were doing everything. Very cool. How was it? Was it cool? Okay, there we go. I would definitely recommend it. It's a great vantage point of the city, like a bird's eye point of view. Just give you a frame of reference for everything. And that exhibit at the very top, you'll see like 5 window frames. So that platform is not only just a sky deck, but it's something called the ledge. It is a 3-inch thick glass walkway, so as you step, you can look all the way down from 1,600 feet in the air through the glass rooftop to sidewalk. Alrighty. You may have noticed that we just did a quick turn alongside the Chicago River. So we'll be going back through the same route that got us here, just talking about other buildings or getting different viewpoints of things we weren't able to, just going back on that same route. That first stop is going to be just past this bridge on the right-hand side. You'll see the letters C and E as we go by. That's going to stand for Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Just above that logo is a 50,000 square foot trading floor. So this is our massive stock and trading floor, like the ones you might find on Wall Street. And these towering arms on either side, they're built, and they look completely parallel, but they're actually built intentionally 4 inches apart from each other. The reason for that is that plays a game of tug and war between either towering arm. And that suspension actually stabilizes and evens out to support the whole building. This next building on the right, when we go by in the middle, you'll see that this is the Civic Opera Building. So, this building, when it was designed, is supposed to look like a giant throne. The armrest on either side, right and left-hand side, the seat is this riverside wall that ends abruptly. And if you look all the way towards the top, you'll see the back of that throne chair acting as like the towering scraper towards the top. So the reason this building looks like a throne is because it was financed by a man named Samuel Insull. He was the inspiration for the book and movie Citizen Kane. He was a railroad electricity tycoon in Chicago in the early 1920s. And if you remember, across the river, all of this land back in the day, just trains coming in, trains coming out. So that's his empire. So every single time a train leaves and arrives, that is money in his pocket. He's literally watching his empire grow. I'm sure he was a very down-to-earth guy to hang out with. There's also another reason why that throne is facing across the river. So back in the day, Samuel had a mistress. This mistress was an aspiring opera singer in New York City. She auditioned for the Broadway Opera House. When she auditioned, she didn't make it. She didn't make the cut. So he built her very own opera house here in Chicago, where she could perform and headline every night if she wanted. I'm sure that was based on merit. And with its throne facing across the river at his railroad empire, but the back throne facing east, facing New York, facing Broadway. And guys, that's another alternate view of the new Salesforce Tower. That's the newest building. It opened up in early, I believe, January of 2023. So the newest building here on the river. Guys, it's just a cool part of the day, seeing the city coming in with a little bit of sunlight and then going out, just going to be slowly and completely lit as we go by through the end of it, lighting up right in front of your very eyes, showing you different aspects you may not catch normally in the daytime as well. As we come along this fork in the river, you can already see this kind of bend here on the right-hand side. That's going to be the last section of the Chicago River Walk. It's going to be called the Lawn, but again, they all have their own name. I bet you'll never guess why we call this section the Lawn. It has nothing to do with the lawn and the lawn chairs. But just above it is one of the more popular buildings in the city of Chicago. That's going to be 333 West Wacker Drive. So the curve of the shape of the building reflects the curve of the shape of the river where we're at right now. The three different shades of green tile glass reflect the color of the river water, and you can see the opposite skyline reflected off the face of the building as well. Also, Chicago's lucky enough to have a bunch of movies and TV shows filmed here in the city. One of the most iconic is going to be Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you've ever seen the movie, there's a parade scene at the very end, and it cuts to Ferris Bueller's dad in his office trying to like spy on him and find him. That office building is right here, 333 West Wacker. And I'll be talking about other spots around the city or anything like that that's connected to movies and TV. Also, as we pass through this bridge, Franklin Street Bridge, it'll be my favorite viewpoint of our tour because it gives you a long shot, almost like hallway corridor view of the last remaining stretch of downtown. It's a bunch of different styles, a bunch of different buildings, almost kind of framed narrowly together. It's just a cool shot of the remaining part of the city. Going back to your right-hand side, this building with kind of the purple lit columns on the very top and that black stained slanted roof, that is going to be the Builders Building. And I know you're thinking, wow, what a name, very creative. Yes, I agree. If you look towards that middle line dividing the building, it's actually two buildings put together in one building. The right-hand side finished and opened in 1980s. The left-hand side finished in the 1920s. So you have two different decades, two different architectural styles, two different architects, all pushed together in one building. And when we pass this bridge, if you look to your right, you'll see those differences a little bit more close up with the detail. Next building I'll be talking about straight ahead, you can see that green tower to the right with that gold pointed top. That is the Carbon and Carbide building. So, it is built to look like a giant champagne bottle. The reason it's supposed to look like a giant champagne bottle is because it was built during the Prohibition when we were not allowed to drink from champagne bottles. So in order to show how they felt about that, they decided to build a huge one for the government to look at. If they can't drink it at home, they'll have to look at it every day here. So, the frame of that building is green and black terracotta tiles. And that gold top that you see, that is all real 24-karat gold leaves completely covering that surface top of the building. Also, another popular spot on the Riverwalk this Greek amphitheater style seating. It's a great spot for people maybe catching a lunch break during work hours, or killing time before a dinner reservation, or just meeting up with friends. The whole Riverwalk, as you guys can tell, stretches from essentially where we got through on Riverside Drive, going all the way through this fork in the road. So it stretches through the heart of downtown. Would definitely recommend it. Just checking out Chicago, specifically at night. And again, that marketplace theme will extend into the other side of this Riverwalk as well. So there's tons of different dining, food options, bar, cafe options as well, extended along this side. It doesn't run on the other side of the river. It's mainly on to your right side for the majority. Next building I'll be talking about is not this white gray tower, it's the one behind it. So you'll see those corner domes on either side raising upward. That is the Jewelers Building. So, in the 1920s, it was a hub for jewelry exchange. This is where people would come, sell their gold, silver, diamonds, whatever jewelry valuables they had. They would trade it in this building right here. But what was happening is, they started showing up, and they kept getting robbed at gunpoint every single day. That's because if you see this top dome that's going to be coming around the back side of this building, that used to be called the Stratosphere. The Stratosphere was a speakeasy bar and club run by Al Capone, a notorious gangster here in the U.S., and he would run all of his mobster operations out of this building. And so, in order to avoid his mobsters and getting robbed every day, and I can't imagine waking up every day going to work knowing you're going to get robbed again, they built a second floor exit off this road right here, Wacker Drive, and then once inside, they built the world's first indoor car elevator. So I'm sure they had some guy just like freaking out, cranking them up. But first world's indoor car elevator, and now you have two iconic Prohibition-era buildings in this kind of corner shoulder in the downtown Chicago skyline. This glass wall that you see in London House at the very top, really cool spot for a quick bite to eat, or if you want to get rooftop drinks downtown here in Chicago. Just a really great view from the downtown angle. Alright, back to tour guide mode. Straight ahead, you can kind of see its columns lighting up light purple, kind of light pink, and the white letters, Chicago Tribune. So that's going to be the office of the newspaper Chicago Tribune, or their older office. They actually moved to a newer one. But their original office burnt down in the Great Chicago Fire. So when they opened a new one, it has one of the coolest how it came to be stories. And if you look at it right now, you'll notice that it doesn't have any other similarity to a style or a building we've seen here today. That's because that style is Neo-Gothic Revival. It's a European Renaissance influence that we put up here today. So when Chicago Tribune announced they were needing a new office, they did something really cool. They made it a world architectural competition. So anyone in the world could spin in a sketch, drawing, a blueprint of what the building should look like. And their subscribers every week would vote on which submissions they liked the most. The building designed with the most likes won the competition, got the naming, land, and construction rights, and got to resurrect their very own original design, and now it sits here in Chicago as one of the most iconic buildings in our downtown city. Also, just in between us, this clear glass building lit up right here, that is an Apple store. And if you see that overhanging roof around each corner, from the aerial view, like looking down on top of it, it's supposed to look like a giant iPad in the sky, which is like the most Apple thing ever. All right, you can see that lit up television network logo on your left-hand side. That is going to be NBC Tower. Now, if you've ever been to New York City, maybe you've seen 30 Rockefeller Center, where NBC was founded and still operates out of today. This is an exact replica of that building. And that's on purpose. But this is our sister station here in Chicago. Not only have we had a lot of movies filmed downtown, but also a lot of TV shows. So shows like Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, Steve Harvey, Jerry Springer, and Judge Mathis, all filmed in this building as well. This building right here, if you see that red cap on the top, it's supposed to look like an old steamboat. That's because steamboats used to heavily populate the river back in the 1800s. But nowadays, this building is the Sheraton Hotel. It is considered by many to be the safest place to stay in all of Chicago. The reason for that is a couple of things. On the very top floor, they have a private helicopter pad landing area. Because don't you hate it when you're flying your helicopter and there's like no parking anywhere in the city? Oh man, problems. And all these rooms with these windows that we're passing by, they're all completely bulletproof. So the reason for these extreme measures is not only do we have a lot of celebrities that visit or live here, but a lot of politicians as well. So when we invite our nations or other world leaders to Chicago for a panel, discussion, committee meeting, whatever that may be, they'll most likely be staying in the Sheraton Hotel. Also on your right-hand side, you'll see kind of the exoskeleton of Wacker Drive, a very unique road here in Chicago, one of the most unique roads in the country. It's one of the few roads to have an address point north, south, east, and west, and it has 3 levels to it. You've got Upper Wacker, Lower Wacker, and Lower Wacker. Just 3 creative names. They were really working on that one all night. Lower Wacker is probably my favorite. Alright, just in front of this bridge on the left-hand side is our last spot on the architectural tour. And if you're wondering to yourself, Daniel, there's no building there. I agree, but still a spot of significance. So beyond those wooden posts nailed together in that overgrown grassy lot, that is something that hoped to a project called the Spire. Very similar to Trump Tower, this building, or this lot, was supposed to have a building that was the tallest building in the entire world. But after 9/11, they paused all ongoing skyscrapers in the U.S., so they were able to strike the ground and foundation of this building, but they had to pause because as well they had some legal construction rights issues going on. But the hope is that this lot now sits empty, with one day hosting the world's tallest building in this corner pocket of downtown Chicago.